Beatrice Rana, you are playing the Tchaikovsky concerto, the grand Tchaikovsky concerto this week with Helsinki Philharmonic. What is your history, your common history with this concerto?
It's a very long story because I started playing this concerto when I was 15. So it has been now 10 years that I have been playing this concerto. And I always had a very intense love story with this concerto because, of course, it's the dream of every pianist to play that. But at the same time, I have to say that among musicians, I think it's a little bit underestimated concerto because it's a concerto that is very popular with the audience, and sometimes the beauty of the melodies and the beauty of these big lines in the orchestra, they contradict the real nature of this concerto, which is a much more intellectual one. And myself, I had to go through the process of really understanding this concerto because when I was 15 years old, I was always focusing on the virtuosistic passage of the concerto, which is already a lot. I mean, this concerto, when it was first composed, was thought to be unplayable. But then, over the time, playing with different orchestras, being able to work with great conductors, I really discovered the deep nature of this concerto, which is amazing.
How do you find, in general, well, this is so much played, and as you said, its audience's favorite. How do you find a fresh way to interpret such works or sort of make it your own?
It's very difficult to find a fresh way to play with the orchestra because it's playing with the orchestra. So I try myself to pursue a real interpretation process. But then when I get in front of a new orchestra, there is also some tradition to fight because it's a very much played concerto, and as with all this popular repertoire, there are so many traditions that sometimes don't really fit with what it's really written in the music. Honestly, I always try to approach this concerto as it is the first time that I'm playing it, and also as the first time that audience could hear that, because we have to remember that the first time that people listened to this concerto, it was really a shock. No one could believe that such music could be written and played. So I think it's important to bring this authenticity of a real revolution in the piano literature and in the music writing.
Mm-hmm. Apart from when you are building an interpretation of a piece, how do you build it? What other things apart from music or musical stuff inspires you?
For example, with Tchaikovsky, we have to consider that he was a great symphonist and also a great ballet music writer. And that is a really important part of this concerto because both ballet and both symphonic writing is really important. And sometimes the piano is conceived as an instrument against the orchestra rather than a soloist with the orchestra. And another thing is, in this concerto, very important is also the folklore, the popular themes that come, especially in the third movement. Above all, I think that what's more important is the theatralic way of thinking this music, because in all the three movements, there is a change of scenario very sudden and very strong at the same time. So it's really important to not to get focused on the piano writing, but really to have a wider idea of music. And in this sense, also, of course, for me, the main inspiration is normal life, because especially with this kind of pieces that are not are really a storytelling. It's really important to have a story in mind and to tell people this story.
Yes, and I have a life outside being a musician.
Well, yes, I mean, people shouldn't forget that we are human persons
That's right.
before.
you also, of course, play recitals. And this spring you are having a recital program with Schumann, Ravel, Stravinsky.
Yes.
What inspires you and how do you put up recital programs?
Well, it's always different. It always takes me a lot of time to decide the program. For example, this year I'm focusing on this program, which is focused on piano as an orchestra instrument, because you know, we pianists, we grow up with the idea that piano, of course, is a great instrument, but it's never the best. When we have to do a melody, we have to sing it as a singer. When we have a full sound, we have to think of an orchestra and blah, blah, blah. It's always trying to reach another sound. And that's what was the starting point of this recital. So there is Schumann, Blumenstück, and symphonic etudes. The Blumenstück is, of course, rather inspired to a song for piano and, of course, voice. And then symphonic etudes are inspired to the orchestra sound. And then it goes to Ravel with the Miroir, which Ravel himself orchestrated, two of them, where the piano becomes just a source of inspiration for a descriptive nature. So it goes just beyond the limit of imagination. And then Stravinsky, the Firebird, which was born for orchestra and then transcribed for piano. So I always try to make these kind of journeys where I can really also have a strong point of view about piano literature.
Mm-hmm. And you get to be the orchestra yourself. You don't have to
Hopefully,
adjust.
yes.
What about your practicing? How do you practice? And if there's very little time for you to practice at some point, are there certain things that you won't skip, that you want to do every day?
Well, of course, when there is not enough time to do a proper practicing, which is very much the case when I'm traveling, it's very important to have in mind what's really important to fix and to work. I can't say what I always do because it changes every day, and playing so much on stage, also the priorities change, because sometimes on stage you realize that something is working better and something is not working as I imagined. But definitely if I have time to do a proper practicing as I am home, I try also to take some time for experiments, because of course when you are home you always try to project yourself in a concert hall, but the result is always very different. So to make experiments and to really try out different ideas, and not to fix them suddenly, but just to give some options, I think it helps me a lot with the interpretation process.
So it's not like 5 hours of scales every day?
Oh no, I never did scales, and my teacher was always very angry to me about that.
Oh, sorry to bring it up. Okay, thank you for this interview, and I hope you feel at home with the piano and on
definitely.
stage and in Helsinki.
The stage here in Helsinki is fantastic.
Enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.